Hi, I want to go over a couple things about checking your reloads, especially reloads that you're going to be using in competition. So I've got three different things set out for you, and I'm going to cover first 9mm. So in 9mm, when I'm checking a case gauge, this is a Dillon case gauge. I'm going to drop it in, and I'll show you some at speed here in a minute. But I'm going to drop it in. I'm going to check and make sure that it's flush, the primer is not upside down or dented, and then I'm going to also look and make sure that the bullet is inside the maximum overall length. I have two different gauges. This one is a Lyman. I actually like the Dillon a little better, see, a little bit more polish on the inside. But let me show you a couple that are bad. So here's a round. When I look at it, I can't really feel that with my finger, but you should be able to see that the primer's upside down. So you got to visually check both sides of the round. Here's one that has a primer in it, case gauges correctly. Again, you can't feel it, but that's actually a primer that was pushed back out by the decapping pin, but is a spent primer. That's going to be a dud. When you fire that round and the primer pushes that back in, you'll never know what happened. That happens a lot. Actually, probably more than people think. So here's a couple that don't case gauge properly. That one, obviously, if you look at it, it's got a nice bump on here. That was either a lot of times loaded, maybe a Glock chamber that was really loose, who knows, but doesn't case gauge. That one is getting thrown away. Not going to use it. Here's another one. It case gauges kind of okay. It's a little bit high. If I pushed it in, I might get it in there, but it's not exactly fitting into my case gauge. What I'm going to do with this, and this just comes from experience, is I'm going to set that one aside and I'm going to put it in what I call my practice bin. So I'll use that in practice, but I won't use that in a match. Here's one that case gauges okay, but I don't know if you can see this, but as you go across the bottom, the bullet is just a little bit proud, meaning the bullet actually sticks up just a little bit out of the case gauge, meaning it's too long. Well, the next step to checking your ammo is making sure that it will work in your gun. So here's a barrel. Goes in just fine, no problem. From that perspective, does the same with that guy, no problem from that perspective. But here's the question. I've got three different magazines. I have three different kinds of 9mm that I shoot. Will this round be too long in the magazine? Well, if you look at it like there, can't tell. Same thing here, can't really tell. So if it's too long, you got two choices. Either stick it in the practice bin or throw it away. But what I will often do is I will actually check it. So I'll take another round and I'll go to put another round on top of it, and I can feel when I'm pushing down, I can actually feel that start to jam against the front of the magazine lip. If I push this in further, now I've got what's eventually will turn into either a salt shaker or a malfunction. So now I've got a round in there, it's jammed in there, I can't even get it out. Okay, I'll do it later, I know how to get it out. So that round that's underneath won't even put enough pressure on this round for it to come up above the case lip and go out. Okay, so that's a round that I wouldn't use. I also, you notice me check the barrel. If I put a match barrel or a tighter chamber into my pistol than what came from the factory, some ammo may or may not work. So I've got to not just use the case gauge, but I've got to make sure that it runs in my gun. There are some cases where my case overall length, I may want to be a little bit longer than what the case gauge says. Make sure it runs in my gun and in my magazines. Moving to 223, same thing. I've got a Dillon case gauge. Little different in how you check these, but here's a bad one. It doesn't go all the way down. It sits high. Again, that one's not that bad. I'm going to stick that in my practice bin. I know from experience that will run perfectly fine in my gun, but I'm still not going to take it to a match. That one is perfect. So I've got a cutout here that I don't want to drop below this cutout, so I want a little ridge here. You see my fingernail, I can catch that ridge. And I don't want it to be above this second ridge. Okay? When I turn it over, same kind of thing. But this is visual. I want to see my mouth at that cutout, but I don't want to see my mouth above this cutout. So it's visual. You've got to look at it. Okay? Again with 223, it's a little bit easier than with a pistol magazine, but I'm taking my magazine, put a round in there, I'm going to push it down and make sure I've got a little bit of wobble, a little bit of clearance in my magazine. If I don't, different magazine, or maybe check my rounds. Going to move up to 308. So 308 case gauge, that guy drops in, same kind of thing. We're going to check visually, make sure everything okay. That round, not a problem, perfect. That guy sits too high. Okay, so that gun, depending on why that's created, either you just did a neck size sometimes won't fit in your case gauge. So you got to make sure you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. This particular bullet is a hunting round, so I'm not going to take that one. I'm going to set it aside. Again, it's going to go in my practice bin. Here's some of my competition match loads for 243 Winchester. I'm still going to use a 308 case gauge because the case is basically the same, and I can check my overall length. Now I've dimensioned this, I know exactly what's correct, so I know what the case should look like in this configuration, and I want to check and make sure it's the same all the time. But since I'm neck sizing these particular ones, as long as they fit into the case and everything's okay, no big deal. Same thing though, I'm going to want to take my magazine, whatever magazine they're going in, and make sure. Now these are sized right on the edge. I mean, I've got about 4 thousandths of an inch. Okay, so push them down. I don't know if you can hear that, but I'm pushing it back and forth and making sure that it will clear. So I hope that helps you a little bit about case gauging and what you need to do in order to make sure that your ammo runs through your gun. It's not just putting it in a case gauge, it's making sure that it will actually run in your gun as well. So I know there are people who have these, big 100-round blocks and stuff. That's all fine and great. I want to show you how I do it. Basically, when my ammo is loaded, I've got a bin that comes off my 650. I just drop them in. I'm going to touch there and look and drop it. So once you get going good at this, you're going to look at 2 spots. You can't see what my eyes are doing, but I'm really looking to see that that primer looks correct. And I've got some light on it so that I can see it. I'm covering it up. I'm looking to make sure that it's not proud on that side, and then I release it. That one is bad, so that one's going to go in a practice bin. I'll set it aside. That one's bad. Good. 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 And eventually you'll get to where you can actually watch Clemson lose to Alabama, and it won't be that big a deal because you can just do this, and when they scream you can look up and see the replay.